Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video like up. The town of Hope Valley was unusually quiet this morning, the kind of stillness that feels both comforting and unnerving at the same time. The early sun spilled a golden light across Main Street, and the crisp mountain air carried the scent of pine and distant wood smoke. Yet beneath that postcardperfect.com, there was a stirring mixture of anticipation and unease that everyone in town could feel but few dared to voice. Season 13's unfolding events had a way of making even the simplest days feel layered with meaning, as though the smallest encounters might shift the course of someone's future. Elizabeth Thornton stepped outside her home, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The quiet suited her, but her heart was anything but calm. Nathan Grant's last words to her still lingered in her mind, spoken softly but weighted with years of restraint. He had asked her if she truly knew what she wanted, not in a moment of passion, but in a moment of rare vulnerability. She'd given him no answer then, partly because she didn't have one, and partly because she was afraid of what her heart might confess if she let it speak freely. Now, as she stood watching the morning light touch the hills, she knew a reckoning was coming. Meanwhile, Nathan himself was already on horseback, riding toward the outskirts of town. This wasn't on official duty, at least not in the Mountie sense. His reason was more personal. A letter had arrived for him late the night before, from someone he hadn't heard from in years. The handwriting had been instantly recognizable. The words inside brief but urgent. Whoever this mysterious sender was, they claimed to have information about a decision Nathan made years ago, one that might now ripple into his future with Elizabeth. But why now? Why in such secrecy? The questions gnawed at him as the cool wind brushed against his face. At the cafe, Rosemary Coulter was busier than usual, moving between tables with a kind of determined energy that made Lee raise an eyebrow. She had been in the midst of planning a small charity event for the town, but this morning she seemed preoccupied with something else. What Lee didn't yet know was that Rosemary had overheard a snippet of conversation at the Mercantile too. Travelers passing through had mentioned a land survey being conducted just a few miles away. This wouldn't have been unusual if not for the fact that the surveyors had been asking specifically about parcels near Hope Valley's northern ridge. Rosemary, being Rosemary, wasn't content to let that mystery pass her by. Lee, for his part, had been working closely with a new arrival in engineer from Union City, who claimed to have ideas for improving the mill's output. The man's name was Thomas Whitford, and while his suggestions were practical, his interest in Hope Valley seemed to extend far beyond lumber production. More than once, Lee had caught Thomas gazing out toward the ridge with a look of quiet calculation. Lee had decided to keep a friendly eye on him, though he hadn't yet mentioned his suspicions to Rosemary. He knew all too well how quickly her investigative instincts could spiral. At the schoolhouse, a moment unfolded that would have far-reaching consequences. Little Allie Grant had brought in a small, hand-carved wooden box to show Elizabeth and the class. She explained it was something her uncle had given her, a keepsake passed down from his own father. Inside were only a few items: a silver button, a scrap of folded paper, and a faded photograph of a woman standing in front of a railway station. Elizabeth noticed Nathan's expression when Allie mentioned where it came from. It was as though the sight of that photo had struck a chord deep inside him. Nathan quickly composed himself. But Elizabeth saw enough to know that whatever was inside that box meant more than Allie realized. Elsewhere in town, Fiona Miller had been receiving cryptic telegrams from a contact in Union City. She'd been careful not to read them in public, but one had arrived the night before that made her stop in her tracks. The message hinted at a business opportunity, something that could change the course of her career, but it came with a warning. If you pursue this, be prepared for opposition from those you trust. Fiona wasn't easily rattled, but she also knew that in Hope Valley, big opportunities often came with bigger risks. The fact that the telegram mentioned names she recognized only made her more cautious. Molly Sullivan, meanwhile, found herself dealing with an unexpected visitor. A man she hadn't seen in over a decade walked into the infirmary asking for her help. He was weary, carrying an injury he refused to fully explain, and spoke in careful, measured words. Molly recognized him instantly, and with that recognition came a flood of memories she had long tried to push aside. She agreed to tend to his wounds, but as she worked, she realized he was more than just a passerby in need of help. He was here, with a purpose, and it likely tied into the subtle tension growing in town. As the day went on, conversations seemed to carry double meanings. People exchanged glances in passing as though they all sensed something was brewing. Hickam, usually cheerful and straightforward, had been unusually distracted. He was overseeing a delivery from the train depot when he noticed a crate marked with a symbol he didn't recognize. When he asked about it, the deliverman shrugged and said it wasn't on the manifest, but that he was told to bring it directly to a certain address. One that Hickam knew was unoccupied. By the time evening fell, the threads of these separate stories were already beginning to weave together. Nathan returned to town, the letter from that mysterious sender folded carefully into his pocket. He didn't tell Elizabeth about it, least not yet, but he knew he couldn't avoid the truth forever. Elizabeth, on the other hand, had spent the afternoon replaying that moment with Allie's wooden box in her mind. The photograph inside had a name written faintly on the back, and though she couldn't quite read it, she had a nagging feeling it was connected to a part of Nathan's life he had never shared. Rosemary and Lee met at home that evening, each with their own piece of the puzzle. Rosemary shared her theory about the surveyors, while Lee mentioned Thomas Whitford's suspicious interest in the ridge. They realized their two bits of information might not be separate at all. Someone, somewhere, was making plans that involved the land near Hope Valley. And the Coulters knew they needed to find out who. And why before it was too late. The next morning brought with it another surprise. A new stagecoach arrived in town carrying passengers who seemed to know exactly where they were going. Among them was a young woman with an air of quiet determination. She introduced herself as Clara Benson, saying she was looking for a man named Nathan Grant. The moment Nathan saw her, his expression shifted. This was not the face of a stranger to him. Elizabeth, standing nearby, caught the change and felt her heart twist with questions. Who was Clara, and why had she come now, just as so many other tensions were beginning to rise? It wasn't long before Clara revealed part of her reason for being there. She had information about land disputes in the Northern Ridge area, the very same land the surveyors had been examining. She also carried a journal belonging to her late father, filled with notes that hinted at deals and promises made years ago. Some of those notes mentioned Hope Valley by name, along with references to Mounties stationed there. Nathan's name appeared more than once. Meanwhile, Abigail Stanton, still absent from the town physically, had been quietly sending letters to a select few residents. One such letter reached Rosemary that morning, containing an update about Abigail's efforts to help a nearby settlement. But tucked between the lines was a subtle warning. Be cautious of changes that appear to come with gifts. Not all generosity is what it seems. By midday, Fiona had quietly approached Elizabeth with her telegrams, asking for advice. She didn't want to alarm the others, but she sensed that whatever business opportunities she was being offered might be connected to the same shadowy plans affecting the ridge. Elizabeth listened carefully, realizing that more than one person in town was being drawn into something that didn't feel entirely safe. The days ahead in Hope Valley would be filled with gatherings, private conversations, and decisions that could alter the future for everyone. The townspeople would soon have to choose whether to protect the quiet life they cherished or face the changes that were knocking at their doors. Nathan's past, Elizabeth's heart, Rosemary's instincts, Lee's suspicions, and Clara's arrival were all pieces of a puzzle that was only just beginning to take shape. Some would see the coming events as an opportunity. Others would see them as a threat. But one thing was certain: Hope Valley was about to be tested in ways it had never been before. And for Elizabeth and Nathan, the choices they made in the days ahead might finally decide whether their paths would join or forever drift apart.